Good to go. Okay, look, we're up and going. All right, ready to go? Welcome, 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 welcome to day 4 and no more. You have officially made it to the last day. Folks, this has been a magical week of stories, storytelling, inspiration, and all kinds of book fun. And you guys have shared it with us. We've been hearing about the incredible views on YouTube that you guys have been tuning in. You've been enjoying the excitement with us and our authors. And we just want to thank you from the bottom of our heart. It's been an amazing time. But the fun is not done. It has just begun for today. So before we get into today, I thought it would be cool. Actually, let me introduce the Queen first, and then maybe I could just kind of talk back and forth with the Queen. I don't want to say too much before the Queen gets here.
Hold on, EXA. I host a meeting here. Actually, I messed up.
Somebody chipped in there. We just got hacked. All right. So I'm going to introduce the instructional library coordinator Queen, the one, the only, Melanie Mulcaster. Welcome back, Melanie. How are you?
I am absolutely fabulous. I mean, I am almost crying right now because I'm having such a great time, and I cannot believe we're not at the end. We're never at the end of learning. So, like you said, day 4 and no more. Oh my goodness gracious. Again, just a final thank you to you, Dan, Daniel, our master charmer, to our authors, to our students, to our readers, to our teachers, to our teacher librarians, to our library support staff, our media and communications team, as you previously heard, trying to give us a little tidbits, and of course to the Ontario Library Association for making this all possible for us. I am so delighted that we were able to come into your homes and share our love of learning and our love of reading with you. I'm so delighted that you were able to, if you couldn't join us live, you could join us later with the recording. I'm just, oh my goodness, what are we going to do next year? That's where my mind is.
We're going to have to find a way to blow them away and top this year. So it's going to be our little challenge, right? Wow. Melanie, I wanted to mention before we kicked into our first amazing author, which is Pam Withers, and we're really excited to meet her. Before we get to Pam, I just wanted to just share a few takeaways that I've been getting from all the authors in the previous days, because I'm seeing a kind of theme building here, and maybe your take on it would be cool too. So what I'm hearing from the authors is so far is create who and what you want to see in your book. If you have an idea, a story, a book that's, like floating around in your mind, if there's something that you're not seeing in the world, create it. That is your story. That is your opportunity to create a book, right? So that is something that I've heard from most of our authors. Magic is available to everyone, which is a pretty magical statement. And also get started, start writing, and build. There's no wrong time to start telling your story. So that's just kind of the themes that I've been enjoying from our authors.
And I really like the power of you. And really, it is you. That's you sitting watching us right now. You are so powerful. And I really liked what Anna Humphrey said, that she said that you may be shy and quiet, but you can have an extremely loud and an important voice through writing. So there are so many ways, and I think Kenneth Opal said it yesterday, there's so many different ways that we can communicate and share our voice. And we really, really encourage you to share your voice, because your voice is wanted and your voice is needed. So.
All right, without further ado, we are going to be hearing from 2 special authors today, Pam Withers and Kevin Sylvester. First off, we're going to be meeting with Princess Pam, and we can't wait to hear about her story, inspiration, life, and to hear all the questions that you awesome students have asked. We'd like to welcome Pam Withers with a virtual whoop whoop. Welcome, Pam.
Checking in from Vancouver, my home office.
Nice.
So, hey, I wish we were in a big auditorium with sign bearers and student introducers. but I am awed by the dedication it's taken to turn all this into a virtual ceremony. And so special thanks to all the organizers, and especially to Melanie, Julie, and Andrew. And also to Dundurn Press for publishing my book, Stowaway. So I am sitting here in my Vancouver home office, and I'm Pam Withers, author of 21 young adult sports and adventure novels. And the reason I write sports and adventure novels is that that is how I misspent my youth. I was a whitewater kayak racer. I was a whitewater kayak instructor. I spent 6 years running a summer camp for teens learning whitewater kayaking, and I worked as a whitewater raft guide. I married the Canadian coach, and I was kayaking the day before my son was born, on flat water, of course, and with an extra large spray skirt over my tummy. Now, I'm supposed to tell you 3 things that you may not know about me. So I'm going to begin with a picture of my mother and father and older sister when they lived in above the Arctic Circle. And my mother used to travel by dog sled across the frozen river to deliver babies of the indigenous communities around. So that's, I guess, how I got my adventurous credentials. Okay, item number 2. I kayaked the Colorado River through the Grand Canyon when I was 21 years old. That's class 5 on a scale of 1 to 5. And it was the trip of a lifetime. And I actually rolled my kayak before and after that snapshot. Okay, so number 3, besides reading and writing and outdoor sports, my passion is sewing. And during this COVID isolation period, I made 4 quilts and also 162 masks, most of which I gave to homeless shelters in Vancouver. And I'm feeling like giving you a bonus 4th, so I am crazy about table tennis. I'm completely addicted. I play like 10 hours a week. Any other ping pong fans out there? Yes. I'm actually a very competitive person. I think that's because I was the second of 6 children. Did you know that second-born children tend to be competitive? You must know that, Daniel, because you are a second. Okay, it's time to read from Stowaway. First, I'll read you the summary on the back. When Owen's parents leave him on his own for a week, the 16-year-old gets bored and hatches a crazy idea. Sneak onto the yacht that's visiting the sleepy Pacific Coast island where he lives and stow away on an adventure. Once on board the vessel, Owen quickly finds that the idea is anything but innocent fun. The ship is packed with teenagers from Central America, and it looks like Owen has stumbled into a people smuggling operation. Complications pile up, and as things head from bad to worse, a haunting incident from Owen's past tightens its grip on him. There's only one way to break free and make his way home. Owen and the first mate, Arturo, a former street kid, must work together to commandeer the boat and win the trust of those on board. But who's friend and who's foe in the shifting tides? Okay, I'm going to read you a little bit of chapter 1. So this is Owen on Horton Island, which is fictional, British Columbia, Canada, and Horton Island fictional is just west of Vancouver. I sit on our dock, the tips of my shoes in the frigid May water, 49 kinds of bored. Nothing ever happens around here. It's Dullsville without the Ville. I've devised a punishment for parents who move to an island so small that it doesn't even have a school. For starters, they should be wrapped in seaweed and left at low tide for jellyfish to sting and seagulls to guano bomb. There's no one close to my age on this entire 3-mile-long sea-locked lump of dirt and trees. I have to catch a water taxi, named the Scholarship, to the nearest island with a high school, where I get treated like a redneck just because the kids on that island are 39 times bored. Since today is Saturday and the local Coast Guard officer is away, I leap up and move along the dock, scanning the dozen boats in our marina for one to joyride later this afternoon. Then I can cruise around, swipe cans of beer from the locked up summer cabins, and shoot fish with my air gun. Or step into Charlie Aitken's bull pasture and play chicken with Ruffian, his 2,000-pound beast with a bony head and a neck thick like a mobster's. One day I'm going to leave this rain-soaked smidgen of sod and really see the world, have adventures, cruise out of one of the Coast Guard academies with honors, save dinghies in distress. Till then, all I can do to keep myself from going brain dead is train my binoculars on passing ships and dream I'm escaping on them. Or play ring toss with life ring boys, which I'm actually pretty good at. Just as I'm selecting a 25-foot cabin cruiser on our dock as my getaway vehicle, my mother's bullhorn voice sounds from above. Owen! Owen! Her call is all but drowned out by the noise she's making clanging the ship's bell fastened to our house on the cliff above. Lunch! My runners squeak to a halt on the slimy board. Perfect. After lunch, she and Dad have to catch a ferry to a plane, which means I've got a get-out-of-jail-free card. Coming, Mom. I sprint along the dock and count all 120 steps up to our house for the 1,120th time, not pausing on any of them. I savor the burning in my calves because I'm all about fitness, as all future Coast Guard officers should be. So, Owen, my dad says, tugging on his beard as he clicks his suitcase shut, you've read the list of stuff you need to do while we're away? Replace those 2 rotting steps, shovel up the otter poop, swab the slime off the dock, change the oil on the 2 ketches, and fuel up any customers who stop in. My parents own Stewart Marina. It's one of only 4 fine business establishments on this West Coast islet, along with the hardware store, bakery, and general store. My current occupation is marina maintenance slave and sometimes spy, and my goal is to be captain of a very large ship elsewhere. At the very least, I aspire to escape this worthless wart of woodland and become a wayward wanderer soon. That's my boy, Dad says, like I'm 10 instead of 16. Usually I'm mistaken for even older than I am, given my height and style and soul patch. But parents have a way of shrinking you. Dad pushes the day's newspaper at me. Another ghost ship story, a condemned cattle freighter they bought from a scrapyard. He shakes his head and frowns. What's this world coming to? In Europe, I ask as I take the paper from him and scan the story. Illegal immigrants from the Middle East and Africa have been washing up on Europe's shores for a while, dead or alive depending on their ships, the weather that week, and local rescue efforts. But the ghost ship stories are the most haunting. Immigrants paying for a berth on a boat that their handlers abandoned mid-channel. Yeah, they locked up the passengers in the freighter's animal pens, jammed the controls, and took off in motorized boats. So there was no pilot aboard as it tore across the Mediterranean at 9 knots. Would have shipwrecked if the Coast Guard hadn't eventually managed to board and evacuate it. Twisted, I say, and it must have been a complicated job for the rescuers. Yeah, Dad says grimly, be glad we live in Canada. Boats of illegals come to Canada too sometimes. Not often, Dad replies, and we've never had a ghost ship incident. Stop being all doom and gloom, you two, Mom speaks up. Owen, chores, as we were discussing. Chores, Dad echoes as he snatches the paper back with a smirk. Yes, ma'am, I sit up straight. Water the houseplants and don't have any wild parties. She sets plates and a carafe of hot coffee on the table. Aw, but I've invited all my friends over to drink and do drugs. If I had any friends on the island, that would worry her. It pains me that she knows it's not even a possibility. So, now, before I start answering your great questions, and they were great questions, I just wanted to tell you that I've written 2 young adult novels since Stowaway. So just off the press is The Parkour Club, and it is available only on on Amazon.ca, and I'm really proud to introduce you to my co-author, Aruj Hyatt. So it mixes sport, adventure, romance, and cross-cultural understanding. And then there's my next Dundurn book, yay, called The Drone Chase. Oh, I better back up so you can see it. The Drone Chase, which comes out in February, but it's all ready for pre-order. And now, oh, you can find book trailers and readings from both those books on my website, pamwithers.com. So check them out. Questions? Thank you for sending in so many. I'm going to start with a question from James Bolton Public. How did you have the idea, for example, of the yacht and the evil captain? Well, a couple of years ago, my husband and I bought a cabin on Horton Bay of Main Island, and this is a picture of our property. It overlooks the ocean, and it has a dock. And when we got the contract to sign for the house and the dock, the contract had this paragraph: you must provide without compensation temporary accommodation to any vessel that is disabled or that seeks shelter in weather conditions that would render it unseaworthy. What? You mean if a strange boat ties up on our dock in a storm, we can't kick it off? Well, my imagination went into overdrive. What kind of weather conditions? Carrying whom? Staying for how long? Going where? And what shadowy things might they be up to? And what if I were alone? Well, it was indeed a dark and stormy night at the cabin when this story came to me. I could almost hear Arturo rapping on my window. So that's what inspired this novel. Now, the illegal immigrants on the boat, that was inspired by when I was traveling in South America. I had some fellow tourists tell me that in Guatemala, there are vigilantes, people who take the law into their own hands, sometimes shooting at street kids in Guatemala. So no wonder they would want to escape on a ship and go to another country. As for the tree planting incidents in the book, that was based on the fact that my son was on his 5th summer of planting trees up north. And also there actually was a case, as I mentioned in my acknowledgments, of a slave labor camp of illegal immigrants doing tree planting. And finally, the bird imagery in the book, where I talk about, for instance, how turkey vultures actually vomit up what they've just eaten in order to get light enough to fly away. Well, that came from a sign, Canada Park sign on the island where we have a cabin, on a hiking path there. So one day I was standing on the dock of our cabin, or standing up on our patio, when I saw a yacht come into the bay. And I thought, that is exactly the type of yacht I've been imagining for this story I'm writing. So I immediately baked some cookies, and I started to, I took off in my kayak from our dock to this yacht, taking with me the freshly baked cookies, an autographed book, a camera, and a notebook. And I paddled up to that yacht. You can actually see my kayak on their stern in this picture. And I said, welcome to Horton Bay, and do you ever give tours of your yacht? And they said, sure. So this very nice couple allowed me to climb on board and start snooping around their boat, looking for places to hide illegal immigrants. And they actually helped me. They showed me all kinds of closets and bathrooms and the engine room. That's their dog. And and this is their bedroom, and you can see one of the cabinets where the boys could, they got into actually helping me find places that the boys could hide So that is how that is what inspired the yacht. Okay, so Britannia School gets the prize for sending the most questions, 4 really good ones. So let's answer those 4. Why is this book called Stowaway? And the person who wrote that then added in parentheses, I like this book. Hey, with an exclamation mark. You made my day. So the definition of a stowaway is someone who stows away, which means to conceal oneself aboard a ship to get free transportation or escape pursuers. Owen was not escaping pursuers, he was escaping boredom. He was bored with his island, and when he saw this strange yacht pull onto his yacht in a storm, he decided it was time to sneak on board for an adventure, because that's what all of us risk-taking, adventure-loving people do, right? So I managed to have this one word that summed up my character, summed up the book, and did readers' taste for adventure. That's why the book is called Stowaway. So the next question from Britannia, when did you become an author? Well, in my mind, it was when I turned 8 years old, because that's when I wrote a little story in a spiral notebook and read it to my younger sister. And she was dumb enough to tell me it was good, and I was dumb enough to believe her. So that's when I decided that I would be an author. I still have that little notebook, by the way. But after years of being a journalist and an editor, I finally published my first novel 21 years ago. So that's the answer you were really looking for. Still from Britannia, how many books have you created? Well, 21 books if you count Drone Chase, my new Dundurn book. I've also written 3 nonfiction books, including one for parents and teachers called Jumpstarting Boys, about how to get boys to read. Okay, the final one from Britannia, which I imagine Britannia must be full of bright, ambitious overachievers to send us 4 such good questions. Okay, do you like making and reading books for children and youth? Super great question. And the answer is yes, because children and youth are more important than adults, if only because they are next generation's adults. Teens are my favorite people, and that's because I love their humor, their energy, their open minds, and their inquisitiveness. Now, from Houston Public School, the question is, how long have you been writing books for? The answer is 21 years, ever since my son was 10 years old. So I wrote my first book, Raging River, for my son, and I would read him each chapter as his bedtime story. And like any kid trying to extend his bedtime, he would say, Mom, won't you just read me one more chapter? And I'd have to say, no, because I haven't written it yet. Now, I actually wrote a lot of that novel in a cold, chilly hockey rink while he was at practice, and he claimed that I wouldn't look up to see his goals, but you and I know that I looked up each and every time just in time. And also, you know, that novel took 3 years for 9 publishers to reject it before a 10th sensible publisher accepted it. So you have to be really persistent and confident to be an author. Sunnyview Middle School has asked me, when did you first realize you wanted to be a writer? Well, again, that was around age 8. So I practiced writing by keeping a diary. I kept it for years and years and years, maybe 10 years. And I also wrote little short stories, and those are really, really good ways to hone your writing skills. In middle school and high school, I made sure that I worked on the high school newspaper. And in college, I studied journalism. So my very first job was a dream job. It was, straight out of college, editor of a kayak magazine. How cool is that? And that was in California, even better. My second job was working with Adventure Travel in New York City. That's a magazine that was kind of like outside magazine, if you know that one. And then I worked as a newspaper reporter, an editor, and a book editor. So the next question, what inspired you to write this book? was asked by 6 different schools in slightly different ways. So those schools are Thomas Street, Ingleborough Public, Queen Elizabeth, James Bolton Public, and Moreton Way. I especially like the way Moreton Way asked the question, what was your perspective when you wrote this book? And Thomas Street's wording was really thoughtful. Why is this an important story to you? What were you thinking when you wrote this book? What good does this book say to children? Well, I'm going to answer that question by telling you a 5th thing you probably don't know about me. So, growing up, I spent a lot of time on First Nations reserves and with First Nations people. The high school I went to was 30% First Nations, and that's because of my father's work. So I am not First Nations myself, but I do have many good memories, for instance, of the elderly women quilting, hand quilting on a huge frame that was the size of the room, and all the ladies would be around the frame, and the kids would be crawling down underneath, crawling underneath the frame, and they would be sewing and sewing on this beautiful quilt while speaking in their own language. I also remember powwow dancing, and later on, my niece who's half First Nations, would be part of that powwow dancing. I remember eating fried bread. I loved Indian ice cream, and I remember singing in Lakota. So what I'm leading up to is that from a very young age, I became hyper aware of racism. And that theme is an issue I feel really strongly about, and that's why it has wound its way into most, not all, but most of my novels, especially the Parkour Club, by the way. So yes, a story about illegal immigrants from a third world country hiding on a boat to seek a life away from danger and death appealed to me a lot, and that is the premise of Stowaway, which of course is about outdoor adventure because I wrote it. So, Williams Parkway asked, how does it feel to write a book? Well, it feels like going into a room, playing with imaginary friends, and getting paid for it. What could be better than that? So it's not always easy, but it is so fun. And I want to tell people to never give up, because you need to read, read, read. And studies show that the more you read, the better grades you get. The better grades you get, the better jobs you get. The better jobs you get, the more money you have for important things like skateboards and mountain bikes and, stuff that you care about. So stay safe, and thanks for having me. And that's all the questions I got, and I managed to get through all of them, and it's been really fun hanging out with you.
All right, and well done. Nice answering the questions as well, Pam.
Thank you, Daniel.
Style, very nice. You've heard from Pam Withers, and you heard from the Stowaway, which is really, really awesome and interesting. I do have some follow-up questions and comments, if that's okay with you, Pam.
Okay.
Awesome. All right. So I was wondering, right from the jump, actually, I was so intrigued to hear your whole resume of being involved in sports. And I used to love sports. Well, I still do, but I used to do a few sports as well. So I was really interested, as a writer who is always writing about sports, do you ever get tempted to jump outside sports and explore into other industries and topics with your book ideas? Or is it
do that at the same time as the sports? So I twist tie weird things together, like illegal immigrants and sailing,
into sports,
or parkour and refugees. So yeah,
that's unique. So sports is like your tool, and I love that. I love that. So it's taking your passions and putting them all together into a blender, which is really cool. Also, have you ever had a great story idea that was in your mind and you thought it was great, you could kind of see it, you could almost even name the characters, but for some reason that idea did not come to fruition? It didn't end up becoming a book, or nothing happened with it. Has that ever happened?
think it has actually. People always worry about where their ideas come from. I find the ideas rain on me constantly. I can't possibly use all of them. It's not the idea that's important. It's what you do with the idea.
Ah, I have my pen. I'm taking notes. That is so cool. I love that because sometimes, and as you touched on, we're really like, like ideas. What do I do with them? Where do they come from? How do I find them? But I like your philosophy. It's kind of just like a natural process. Just let it happen and do something with it. Execute the idea. I love that. Very, very cool. Pam, I've learned so much. I can't wait to dive into your books to learn more about how you twist and tie your love for sports. We've had a great time, and thank you so much for joining us and answering all these students' wonderful questions.
And hey everyone, I read Daniel's book and it's really good. So read Daniel's book and drink tea while you're reading it.
Yes, and I didn't even pay for that. Thank you. Thank you so much, Pam. I appreciate it. Have a good day.
See you.
Awesome. All right. So moving along beautifully. Wow, we are coming down to our last author, Mr. Kevin Sylvester. But before that, of course, you know what time it is. It is stretch time. We're going to do some stretching before we get to Kevin. And I have a few facts before we get to Kevin. I already see him getting his stretch on.
Oh, I'm ready to stretch. I'm ready to stretch.
Ready to go. He's ready to go. So you can stand up where you are if you can. You can get your arms ready. All right. Oh my goodness.
I've been watching you all week, Daniel. I've been just stealing stuff from you.
It looks like me and Kevin just came up with a dance called the worm dance. So,
that's right. It's the TikTok.
Are you ready? Let's do the worm dance. Let's do it. Just let yourself loose, everyone. Arms ready. All right. Love it. No way. He's not loose after that.
Ah.
Awesome. So now we're all shaken up. If you need a drink of tea, water, go and grab that. Kevin, if you don't mind, I'm just going to share 3 or 4 book facts before we jump into your segment.
I just wanted to stretch.
He was just there for the worm dance. Look at that. Awesome. Okay, so Dan's book facts. I hope you're ready with your ears and your minds. So, all right. John Steinbeck's dog ate the original manuscript of Mice and Men. Did you know? You would have thought the mice ate or the mouse. Oh, I ruined that. Oh, the agony. It was almost funny. Okay. But yes, true story. John Steinbeck's dog ate the original manuscript of Mice and Men, which is a book I actually enjoyed. Actually, I enjoyed the movie as well. So it's really, really cool. Check it out. Another fact, there are more public libraries than McDonald's restaurants in the US. That's probably a good thing. All right, moving along. The world's fastest reader is Maria Teresa Calderon from the Philippines. She is able, this is crazy, she is able to read 80,000 words per minute with 100% comprehension. Is she a robot? Who knows? All right? That is crazy. I can't even come up with 80,000 words in a year. So that's pretty impressive. Good on you, Maria Teresa Calderon. All right? In Iraq, booksellers leave books outside at night because, quote, the reader does not steal and the thief does not read. Ooh, I like that. Very, very cool. And my last fact, reading for just 6 minutes each day can help reduce stress by up to 68%. Study finds. That's why every time my wife is talking to me, I'm reading a book. Well, there goes my night. I am officially sleeping on the couch. I hope you enjoyed those book facts. And speaking of wife, today is my 10th wedding anniversary. So if my wife is watching out there, hopefully I'll make up for it, buy you some fruits or McDonald's, I don't know. But happy anniversary. And on that note, we are going to dive into our next awesome author, which is Kevin Sylvester. He's going to be talking about knowing your stuff. Kevin, welcome to the show.
Daniel, I'm back. Happy anniversary, by the way.
Thank you.
And you also have the best shirt on that I think I might have ever seen.
I tried. Thank you, Kevin.
That is fantastic. So I'm here to talk about the book that was up for the Yellow Cedar, is up for the Yellow Cedar this year, which is called Follow Your Stuff. And you might remember a few years ago, my co-author and I, Michael Helaine, there his name is on the cover, he and I wrote a book called Follow Your Money. And what Follow Your Money was about where money goes. So like, let's say you bought, a video game. You bought a video game. That book broke down where each part of those dollars that you spent went. And the whole trick of that was that it went in smaller and smaller bits to more and more people. So no one gets rich selling just one thing. Everybody has got some little bit that they take out of it. And then we decided we wanted to flip that around. And we wanted to talk about what we would call the global economy. And so what we did in Follow Your Stuff was we talked about not so much the transaction, like how you bought stuff, but we wanted to talk about how the world makes what you use, what you buy, what you eat, what you wear, what you listen to. And we wanted to talk about how connected that world is. And I mean, that is a hugely important thing to understand, that we are a global community. And I think if anyone's paying any attention to the news right now, certainly with the protests in the States and in Canada, but also with what's happening with global climate change, we understand that we are all in this together. There are no you and me, it's us. That's what we wanted this book to talk about. And so we did that through the lens of the things that you create. Now, just to give you an example of what we wanted to do then, we didn't just, throughout the book, we have spreads where we talk about how, let's say, the puffer, if you have breathing problems, the puffer that you get, all the different elements and all the different places around the world where someone does one little thing, let's say mines for a mineral that contributes to the making of that puffer. But what we really wanted to do was to get you to think about your place in that global economy. So for a reading, what I'm going to do is I'm going to read not a spread that has to do with how an actual product is made. I'll talk about that in a second. But what the ethical questions are, what we called the big questions, the giant good global questions. So I'm going to read this. So you've got these kids that run throughout the book, and they're also the same kids from Follow Your Money, who are taking a look at the products that they are buying and that they are consuming. And after we introduce the idea for the book, which I sort of just told you, then we stop and we say, wait, we are not quite ready to go global yet. Before we get started, we have to deal with a huge issue. Is it worth it? Now, you need to ask that question every time you are about to make a purchase that will have an effect, remember, around the world. In fact, it is such an important question that it does double duty. You can and you should ask the question, is it worth it, in two ways. And neither of them is answered with a simple yes or no. So the first way, is it, whatever it is you want to buy, a glass of tea, an iPad, a new wallet, whatever, is it worth paying for? So this is about you, the consumer. Another way to ask that question is, what's worth more, a $50 video game or a $50 pair of jeans? Well, of course, it's a trick question. They both cost $50. But you might be willing to pay $50 for one and then not pay $50 for the other. It's not worth it to you. This is a really important concept, which is known as relative value. Here, relative means that different things are worth more or less to different people, even if they are priced the same. The people who make goods and the people who sell them are constantly balancing what they can charge for an item versus what it costs them to make that item. If no one wants a video game, then it's not worth $50. And this price target moves all the time. So for example, would you like to pay $2,000 for a metal furrowing plow? Probably not. But 100 years ago, you would gladly have shelled out that money because the plow was something you wanted and you needed, especially if you wanted to grow food. So manufacturers, the people in the company that make goods, they try to cut or control costs while still making a profit. So they might shop for cheaper raw materials such as cotton or computer chips. Reducing costs lets them both lower their prices and increases their profits. Another cost that they control is wages, which leads us to number 2. Is it worth what it costs someone else? You see, people get paid to make the goods that you buy. They are compensated for their skill and labor. And in a perfect world, people doing the same job would be paid according to their skill and how hard they work. But actually, how much they get paid could depend more on where they live than how well they do their job. For example, a textile worker in Germany might get paid $15 an hour to make a shirt, while a person doing the same job in Guatemala might get $1 an hour. So a shirt made in Guatemala might be cheaper for you to buy, but that's only because someone is getting paid a lot less to make it. Now, not everyone agrees on whether that's a good or a bad thing. Like I said, there are no simple answers when it comes to questions about, for example, fair wages. So, for example, in Germany, $15 an hour is about the minimum wage and just slightly below the average hourly wage for all workers. Whereas in Guatemala, $1 an hour is well above the average wage. Now, that tells us a lot about the different poverty levels in the two countries. It also shows us why a textile company might move a factory to Guatemala rather than pay the higher wages in Germany. Should they pay their workers more? That's a good question. And that's just scratching the surface of the ways in which wages affect the global economy. You are a huge part of the global economy, and every dollar that you spend is part of a system that touches dozens of lives directly and millions indirectly. And so then throughout the book, we have all these question marks where when an issue like that arises, like wages, we ask you to think about the question. And I'll just leave one with you before I answer your questions to me, which is that you might notice I'm wearing my goofy Buffalo Bison's baseball cap. And the reason for that is I'm going to give you a little game. I'm wearing that cap somewhere hidden in this picture. So I'd like to see if you can find that. You can tweet at me if you find out where I'm hidden in that one. But the other reason I want to show you this picture is that, there, I'll show it. You can see if you can see me right away. Now, the other reason I'm showing you this picture is that this is, in some ways, the heart of what we're talking about in the book as well, which is that you can take almost any thing that you own and you can link it to someone who's doing a job in a completely different part of the world. Your shirt, if it's made out of cotton, that cotton probably did not come from close to where you live. It might have come from India. It might have come from Russia, Mongolia. It could be from Vietnam. The shirt itself may have been made in Bangladesh. The dyes for the shirt might have been made by somebody in Germany, for example. So we want to get you to think about that. So the question that we have on that page is this. Here's a fun game. Name a job. Any job. Can you make a connection from that job to the t-shirt or the shirt that you are wearing right now? Now, while you were doing that, I'm going to do something that has not been done, as far as I know, on this Peel Forest of Reading, Peel District School Board Forest of Reading awesomeness that has been happening, which is I'm going to answer your questions, but I'm going to doodle while I am answering your questions, and you are going to be able to watch me draw. So what I have done is I have printed off the questions that you asked me, great questions all around, and I'm going to doodle a little bit. So here you are, you see me drawing, and I've already started a little bit just to make sure that it works. And so this is an image of a cotton maker. So going back to that question I just asked you, this cotton maker, and picker, I should say, cotton picker, is filling up this bag on her back with cotton. And she lives in Indonesia. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about the questions you asked me, and I'm going to answer some of those questions by adding a little bit more to this drawing as I answer. So question number 1, this was actually asked by a bunch of people, Artesian Drive Public School. In fact, I'm going to separate this one from Artesian Drive Public School because I think this one's really interesting. The question was, is this book designed to take care of our planet? James Bolton Public School also asked, what are some things you do to help the earth? And I think that is an excellent question because it's a question that we talk about in the book as well, which is when we make choices, about where we get things, there are no simple answers. So let's say all of this cotton is traveling quite a ways on jet planes and boats and trains and trucks in order to get it to the factory or the plant that turns that into a t-shirt that you might be wearing right now. All right? So one of the things that's interesting is we want you to think about, and I think this is something that we are all thinking about in the age of climate change, how much gasoline, this is what we would call a hidden cost, how much fuel, how much power is being used to get that cotton to you. And it is a lot. Let's say a giant cloud of CO2 emissions is being sent into the air all the time when cotton is being turned into a shirt that you were wearing. So we wanted you to think about that when you're writing this book. But here's the other thing that's kind of interesting. And again, I'm not going to answer these questions. I want you to think about the complexities of our world. You think, well, that's a lot of this fuel for one t-shirt. Well, yeah, in fact, it is a lot of fuel for that one t-shirt because that is not all for that one t-shirt. The portion that you're using for that t-shirt, because remember, you're making like hundreds and hundreds and thousands of t-shirts in this plant. It might only be this little section here. That's part of it. Then also you think, well, wait a minute, you know, can't we get the cotton from closer to where I live so that we don't travel this far? It just travels in the back of maybe one truck. And you think, well, that's a great idea. But then this person doesn't get the money that they need, maybe to make a better life for themselves, in a place where it's very hard to get employment. Again, I am not saying there's a yes or no answer here, but what I'm saying is that you have to think about all of these decisions. It's going to cost something for everybody, no matter what it is that you buy. And we wanted you to think a lot about the complexity of the world that way. So that's answering that question. I hope that this book is maybe helping you to think about the choices that you make, so that when you ask yourself questions about how the world works, or whether it's worth it, or how much fuel should be burned in order to get you the cotton to make your t-shirt, you can think about it, knowing a little bit more about how those processes actually work, and a little bit about the complexity of some of those questions as well. All right, so question number 2. Now this came from a bunch of different people. Thomas Street asked this, why is this book important to you? Larkspur asked, what inspired me to write this book? A similar question came from Thomas Street Middle School. What inspired you to write this book? What inspires me to write every single book I have ever written is this. Every book I've ever written starts with a what if question. My Neil Flambe books, well, they start, I'll draw a little picture of Neil Flambe here. My Neil Flambe books, they always start with a question, which is, what if the greatest chef in the world was a kid who solved murder mysteries because he had a super powerful nose? And what happens is that allows me to write a book that works like that. All right, well, how about this? Let's get rid of the there. How about what if you could explain how the global economy works just by talking about one product, the t-shirt. Now, we talk about lots of products in the book, including the book itself. We talk about puffers. We do all that sort of thing. I guess that's a puffer. There we go. You see, this is also a thing. Be willing to screw up. You can always fix your mistakes later, even when you're drawing. So imagine that you can talk about any one of these products. What if just looking at them can tell you an awful lot about the world we live in? Well, that was an inspiration for writing that book. I have a book out called Gargantua Jr., Defender of Earth. And basically the question there that I wrote was, what if Godzilla had a baby? And if Godzilla had a baby, would Godzilla ever let that baby do anything? Now, I can't call my baby Godzilla or my monster Godzilla, but I can call that baby Gargantua. So I have a book called Gargantua Jr. So anytime you have a what if question, start answering the what ifs. And the thing about being a writer is that if you ask more questions, you eventually start to get a story. So what if we could talk about puffers, and that would allow us to talk about the medical industry? What if we could talk about t-shirts, and that allowed us to talk about farming and agriculture and travel and all those sorts of other things? That was, I think, the inspiration for Follow Your Stuff. Now, I also was asked, and this relates as well to everything I've talked about so far, how much research, this came from Laurenville and Fletcher's Creek, how much research did you have to do before you could start writing this book? This one seems to be very informational. Thank you. I was thinking of writing a book, just a fun little experiment to do over this never-ending quarantine, and I was wondering about research. Okay, I will say that this was not a fun little experiment. Michael is an economist, so what I did was Michael has access to, for example, stock exchanges that talk about how commodities are priced. So he's able to talk in pretty clear language about what a graph like this, that I would have no idea what it means. He can tell me what that actually means if, let's say, it's talking about cotton prices around the world. Okay, so Michael knows that stuff, but he's researched that stuff for his entire life. Me, I'm trying to take some information and put it in a way that will make sense to, let's say, me as a kid. Here's me as a kid. Gosh, I don't understand all that complicated stuff, but I guess I could understand it if you put it in simple language. And one thing you might not know about me, just going back to what Pam was doing, one thing you might not know about me is that I was a sportscaster for years on the CBC. And one of the things I had to do on my job was I had to talk about sports in such a way that people who didn't like sports could still find it interesting. So I tried to do that with all my nonfiction books. I have books about baseball. I'll just draw baseball. I have books about basketball. And I try to write about those sports in ways that non-sports fans can still find out interesting things, like about, for example, the racial inequality that exists in sports. Like in my book, Basketballology, I talk about how 75% of the players are black, 70% of the viewers are black, one owner is black. One, not 1%, one owner is black. And that's Michael Jordan, who, of course, is one of the greatest basketball players in the world. So always trying to find out ways to explain larger concepts through specific things like, for example, the economy, which I do not totally understand. So I try to do as much research as possible into commodity prices. We did a lot of research into ethical issues, wages around the world. So, for example, when you talk about the wages in Guatemala versus the wages in Germany, they're tiny. But when you also think about the cost of living in Guatemala versus the cost of living in Germany, they're not as tiny compared to that. And again, I'm not saying that that makes this right. Tim, I don't know why I wrote Tim. I'm not saying that it takes this right, but I am saying you have to think about all the complex ways that our world works. I do not like simple answers, so I try to research as much as possible so I don't do oversimplification. I will say one other thing about the book, though. This is not a textbook. The numbers in this book, we say it right off the top, they are generalizations. They are averages. Don't go into a store and say, well, Kevin and Michael say that you make this much profit every time you sell me an apple, so I want you to cut your profits and give me a cheaper apple. That's not how it actually works. Different stores have different costs and blah, 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 blah. So we tried to make it in such a way and that it would be understandable to people who did not really care that much or understand that much about those complexities. So basically, you know, I would go a lot of time spent on the internet, a lot of time calling people who you know, sold goods, a lot of time just trying to figure out how a farmer at a farmer's market gets their products to the farmer's market, things like that. All right, when did I become an author? Well, going back to me as a little kid, let's say, oh, that's not me. Going back to me as a little kid, I wanted to be an author when I was a little kid because I loved comics and I wanted to write comic books. And I even came up with a character whose name was George Fuzzbop. If you've ever had me into your school, I've talked an awful lot about how George Fuzzbop was my very first attempt to create a character. And I got frustrated drawing George because he never looked that good. In fact, he didn't even look this good. He looked more like this. And I could never quite get his legs to be the right size. It was horrible. So I'd always get frustrated and I would cross him out. But the thing about life is that you have to make mistakes all the time. If you don't make mistakes, you can't go from drawing this to drawing this. So maybe if I were to actually do a George book, now Lord knows how loosely I'm drawing here, I might actually create a character who looks like George. The only problem with trying to create a character who looks like George today is I'd probably get sued by the minions because George essentially looks like a minion. So I guess he'd be, well, I guess he'd be eating a banana. Kevin always eating a banana, Kevin. So anyway, that would be when I wanted to be a writer. But like anything else, if, let's say Daniel talked about liking sports. Imagine you're a hockey player. You don't go out for your very first hockey game, play 5 minutes, and go, I'm a hockey player. No, you go out and you play, and you finish that game. And as soon as you finish that game, you think about how you can get better the game after that and after that. So but this was when I was, let's say, in 5th grade. But the time I actually got my very first book published, I was 36 years old. So 30 years later is how long it took me. That much practice, that many mistakes, that many books that weren't good enough, that many illustrations that didn't work very well. And that's how I ended up becoming a published author. And I didn't give up on it. And do I still make mistakes? All the time. Do I have books that people don't want to publish? Yes. One of the myths that people sometimes think about authors, they're like, oh, you always know what you're going to do. No, I don't. Daniel asked Pam the question, like, do you have stories that went nowhere? Yes, I do too. Because I always have notebooks where I've jotted down ideas. But if I don't keep asking what if questions, that's a good sense that I only have an idea. I don't have a story yet. So it takes a lot of time and it takes a lot of work. How many books have I created? Well, I'm up to about 30 right now, and I'm actually working on a couple different books right now. I'm working on a series of novels, graphic novels or highly illustrated books about 6 kids. This is Carl, he's the captain of the team. 6 kids who get zapped with radiation and turn into hockey playing superstars. So there's a little picture of Carl. And I'm also working on a book with my kid Basil, which is about this kid here, whose name is Zed Watson. And Zed is non-binary and sets out with their friend Gabe. Here, I'll draw a picture of Gabe. You can never quite see Gabe's eyes. But Zed and Gabe set out to find this book that's been lost for dozens and dozens of years. And the author buried it with the money that they got for writing the book. So Zed and Gabe go on an epic car journey to try to find it. And another thing you need to know, they don't really like each other very much, at least not at the very beginning of the book. So Zed and Gabe, their book is coming out in 2021. The 2 Super 6 books are coming out in later this year, fall 2020. So that is going to push me up to about 33 books that I will have created and published. I should say published. Because, like I said before, you try to create lots of stories, but not all of them work out. Do I like making books for children? No, children are horrible parasites, and they drive me absolutely crazy. Of course I love doing it. Kids are amazing. And the thing I love about kids, too, and this is why even though this is awesome and we're reaching so many people who maybe couldn't come to an outdoor event or come to the hockey rink to watch us do this, one of the things that I absolutely love about writing for kids is if you write a book and a kid reads it and they like it, they love it. They tell you, oh my gosh, that's the greatest book in the world. I've never read anything as awesome for that. As awesome as that book. That's the best thing ever. And I don't usually like reading, but I love reading your book. That's fantastic. But here's the other thing. The other thing I love about kids is if they're like, that book was the most boring thing I've ever read. Sylvester, you are wasting my time. Well, they'll also tell you that, and I love that too. So what would this be? I guess this would be, there we go, like a broken heart. That's what it would be. It would be a broken heart. Oh, well, you wasted my time, and I'll never read your garbage books again. I love that. I love the honesty, and kids care so much about their books. And one of the greatest things about the Forest of Reading is that the kids vote. The kids decide which books they want to be declared their, oh, I love this book. And if they don't like it, they don't vote for it. So yes, I absolutely love it. And then a bunch of questions. So that was from Britannia Public School. Sunnyview Middle School asked me a few different ways. How long does it take you to write a book? Well, by the time I have the idea, it can depend. So for example, my book, Miners, I had the idea 10 years ago. I was like, wouldn't this be a cool story if we lived in space and we were attacked by pirates? Now, that was 10 years ago, but I didn't like it. I wrote a version of it, and I didn't like it, so I shoved it inside a desk drawer, and I let it sit. And then about 6 years ago, the story popped back into my head. I was actually sleeping. And then, boom, the idea popped back in my head. And I thought, wait, what if it's kids who are the survivors of this pirate attack? Aha! Then I rushed out of bed. And then by the time I started writing it down, I always start by writing it down in a notebook. By the time I started writing it down to when it got published in 2015, that was about 2 years. But once I knew the story, once I knew who the characters were, once I knew what the world of Perseus was going to be like, that's the planet that they live on, it's called Perseus. Once I knew what that was like, the second book took me about 1 year, and the third book took me about 1 year. Now, that is, I would say, probably the average part of writing a book is somewhere in here. We all have ideas. Every author, I saw Kenneth Opel the other day showed his notebook where he jots down ideas that pop into his head. And every once in a while, those ideas will sit there, but then whoop, they'll pop up when you least expect it. And then usually it takes about 1 to 2 years at that point to sit down and start doing the work of making a novel. All right, and then the last question that I have was from a bunch of people, including Williams Parkway, Morton Way. I should also just thank Ingleborough for asking questions, James Bolton. They sort of wrapped into each other. Houston Public School as well. Oh, Houston Public School said, can I make more of these books? Yes. Will I? I don't know. The weird thing about this business, which you understand if you've read Follow Your Stuff, is that the book stores and the book publishers and the authors still need to make a profit, or they can't afford to do more books. So would I like to do more of them? Yes. But the last question, what is the best thing about writing books? And honestly, there are so many, but I think one of them is that when I sit in my backyard, which I do a lot, and I look up at the clouds, I can go lose myself in my own imagination. And I can create worlds like a planet, like Perseus. It doesn't have, well, I guess it has rings, but they're not as visible as that. But anyway, I can create a planet like Perseus. I can take things that I find fascinating, like how baseballs are made, and the fact that old baseballs would sometimes have in the middle of them not a rubber ball, but a fish eyeball. And I find that amazing. And I know that I can write a book about that. The other thing is that I'm a better reader now. When because I'm constantly looking for how other people do things, how they get better, I read way more and better books than I did when I was a kid. I love comic books. That's how I learned how to read. I still read comic books. I love comic books. I love Dogman. I love all of those. But now I will try to read everything. And the reason for that is that the best thing about being a creator is the best thing about being a reader, which is that your brain gets bigger. And when your brain gets bigger, you learn all sorts of things. You learn empathy by reading other people's stories. You learn to be curious, because the more you learn, there's more to learn. You can never learn everything there is to know. You also learn a very valuable thing. This is related to empathy, which is love. You start to love yourself more because you're prouder of what your brain can do. You're prouder of what you can create. And you're proud that you help kids who read your books, or at least you hope you do. You help them do this as well. And you also get smarter because you start to learn how amazingly fantastic our world is. And that is the best thing about being a children's writer and author. And there you go. That is my little forest of reading rant. I don't know. Daniel, was that a rant? What would you call that?
That was, I don't even know what to call that. That was mind-blowing. Wow. Virtual woot to Mr. Kevin Sylvester.
Well, Pam hit it out of the park with the turkey vomit, so I had to kick it up a notch.
You did. A couple notches, actually. I don't even know where to start with that. That was it the fact that you were literally drawing right in front of us as you were talking? I don't know if we start there. That was just, honestly, that was really amazing to see.
Oh, thank you very much.
I want to dive into a few things that you said.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's just motivation. I'm just taking it in. Okay.
I'm ready.
I love how you just displayed. First off, I don't think there could be a more relevant time for what you just shared with us in terms of the connectivity globally of us all and the things we use every day and probably don't even think about this. So A+ on that. I think that was amazing and very relevant. I was wondering, would you ever take up entrepreneurship? Because I feel like you'd be the best business person or just build the most sustainable business. Is that something that's ever crossed your mind?
I think I do. Because one of the weird things I'm not even sure I knew this when I got into this, but when you are a creator in Canada, well, you know this, when you're a creator in Canada, you are a small business. You are in charge of everything. Now, the publishers, I love my publishers. I love them all. I have a bunch and I love them all. They all do amazing things. They publish the books. They print the books. They reveal the books. But it's so much, it has to be about how you engage. So like when I do school visits, I want to make sure that those kids get something out of it, but I want to make sure the schools get something out of it too. I want to make sure that when I write a book, that it's not, I think every author would say that they don't set out to write an important book. They want to tell a story. And I think it goes back to that what if question. But if you don't keep pushing that story yourself, no one's going to buy it. That's not the way it works. So you are part of selling what you're writing, if that makes sense.
I love that. It does make sense. I love it. I love it. I love it. Oh man, this is cool. So you touched on that, on sustainability, showing that connectivity. And this is more a comment, but we could still elaborate on it. I love your concept of what if. I personally use that in terms of just my attitude and just how I display myself to the world and to myself and to everybody around me. Like, what if I don't show who I am? What if I don't say something? What if I don't make this person laugh or try to? What if I don't listen to this person? I use that what if in living, and I love that that's your motivation for where all your stories and your philosophies come from.
Yeah,
that's elaborate on it.
Well, yeah, I think exactly what you're saying is like, we live, I kind of like in the concept of like quantum physics, the multiverse theory, because it's basically the idea that at every moment we are faced with an almost infinite number of choices. And each choice we make puts us in this path or that path or that path. And so you're right, we do that every single day in our lives. Why didn't I? And then you can sometimes go back, why didn't I say something? What if I had? And then guess what? You are creating, because that is an imaginative, creative process. That is you in your head creating a story to articulate what you did or didn't do or what you should or shouldn't do the next time out. We are constant. That's how we live our lives. Our lives are stories. But I also think that if you're willing to ask what if questions, it means that you're humble enough to admit that you might answer that question wrong.
Yeah.
Right? You might make a mistake. Yeah. And that is one of the things that I find so worrisome about our world today, is that we tend to overvalue people who are convinced they're right. They don't ask what if. They answer the question without ever asking it. I don't like that. I don't trust people who think they're right. I just don't.
So one-sided, right?
Exactly. You got to be humble about where the world is and how complex the world is, which I think is one of the things we wanted to talk about in this. It is complex. There are no simple answers to any of those questions that I asked in the presentation or that we ask in the book. I have my own answers to them. And in fact, Michael and I don't agree on the answers. Michael and I do not agree on how this world works. And so we tried to make sure that when we wrote the book, that the kids themselves were able to ask those questions. And as soon as you start asking those questions, you become a better global citizen.
Agree. It's fun, and you also mentioned your love for comics and talking about those facing multiple decisions every second. It reminds me of Flash. Oh,
Flash! I don't know. Is that a DC comic? I'm more of a Marvel man myself. Yeah. In fact, you know what? This is sort of completely by accident. I had this up because I was going to pin it to my wall, and you can't really see it, but my wall is covered. Well, actually, yeah.
Yeah.
I pinned stuff to my wall. This was in the New York Times. Jerry Craft, who wrote the graphic novel New Kid that won the Newbery this year, he wrote this great panel in the New York Times about a month ago. And he points out how awesome comics are. They teach you, one of my favorite panels is, they teach you words. Let's see if I can get it there. They teach you words that you don't learn in other books. Astounding, magnificent. I knew those words when I was 7 years old, right? So if you check this, if you can check this out, look up Jerry Craft, New York Times. I think he's posted it on his website as well. It's just a brilliant defense of how much graphic novels and comic books can bring to your life. That's of value. That is absolutely of value.
Love it. Love it. Well, I've got my fair share of inspiration, and I did not know you were a sports. I'm gonna check the archives. I need to find it and hear how you report on sports. That must be fun to listen to as well.
It was weird. It was weird to be a sportscaster on a network where every time they did a poll of our listeners, they would be like, "Oh, I don't like sports. I don't like sports." But then what was nice is they'd say, "I don't like sports, but I kind of like that guy," because sports should provide a lens. Wait, can I show one more thing?
Yeah, 100%.
All right, just because I mentioned that basketballology book, and I was talking about racial inequality. And so one of the things I wanted to talk about, or what I did talk about, is that in this book, I was so surprised by this, that when we did a breakdown, this is just the illustration that goes with that story I was telling. That's the percentage of Black African-American basketball players on the court, off the court, in the owner's box, on the stands as coaches. What does that tell you about how our world is constructed? These guys make the product. These guys consume the product. These guys own the product. Now, that tells you a lot about the way our world works, I think.
And so visual. It's so visual when you look at it like that on a chart or a pie graph or something. It's like, wow.
Yeah. Well, and that was very important for Anik Press when Anik and I were doing those books, the Baseballology and Basketballology. We wanted to make sure that they were visual because visuals help them learn. Because numbers. I'll give you one last example. I know I'm ranting now, but I'll give you one last example. So I wanted to talk about how big basketball players are. And this is one of those ways where I know from my own experience that the visuals help me understand things. Numbers are abstract. I don't understand if you put a number in front of me, I don't know what it means. It's just floating out there. I do not have a mathematical mind. It's sort of the same with words. That's why I like comic books. If I couldn't create the image in my own imagination, I would just lose. It would be like floating, digits on a page. So I need visuals. So one of the things I wanted to do was talk about how big an NBA basketball player is. So I said, okay, let's talk about their feet. My sneakers, size 8.5. Biggest sneakers in the history of the NBA, Shaq, size 22. And I thought, okay, but I don't know what that means. I know that 8 and 22 next to each other, one's bigger. But I didn't know what that actually meant. So I traced our sneakers, and this is what it looks like. This is the book next to my head. This is the book folded out. I have to go back so you can see the whole book. That's the book folded out next to my head. That's Shaquille O'Neal's foot.
No.
Yeah. That's.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah, that's his foot. I'm basically like the top of his sneaker, and it still doesn't fit on the page. Yeah. So that's why it was important to us to do visuals to help get across the complexity of some of those issues as well.
Oh my goodness. Jeez, man, you students out there are getting a mouthful. I don't know. I think after this week of this virtual reading celebration, I just think we're going to be so immersed in all this content, which is great because there's so much, as you can hear and see, to find in these books and explore and learn. I didn't know that. Again, I thought, okay, Shaq's foot's bigger than mine, obviously, but oh my goodness. Oh,
gigantic. I know. Amazing.
I love it. Kevin, I really, really enjoyed this time with you and learning about your books. And thank you so much for answering all the students' questions. This has been phenomenal.
Well, you've done an amazing job. I've been watching all week, and we love the Forest of Reading. We authors love it. And every single author has brought something different, something new. It's been an absolute blast. And thanks for having me as part of it.
This is great. Great. Let's welcome the Queen, Melanie Mulcaster, in, and thank you, Kevin, once again. Woo-hoo!
Thank you.
And I I love that dance, the worm dance. Never
The
forget.
worm. We should. You and I are TikToking that one, Daniel. We're gonna be famous. And Melanie's got her tiara back. Nice.
Can you do it? All right.
Nice.
I look like one of those. What do you call those people that blow in the wind? The
Oh yeah, like the big the floaty guys. Nice.
Oh, this is
you know what? This week has just been so amazing. And your question, Kevin, what if? We started asking this question back in March when we knew that the Forest of Reading celebration for Peel wouldn't be possible. So we started asking that question, and I'm so glad we did. We thought, what if we made it virtual? What if we, made it so that everyone could access? What if we had different authors with different perspectives? What if? So those questions kept evolving. And, now I'm thinking, what if we do this next year? How might we change it? So we don't always, and of course it was a huge risk. At the beginning, we said, okay, it's a learning experience. It may not work out like we want. It totally did, by the way. It totally worked out beyond my wildest imagination. But you always had that doubt. Well, what if it doesn't work out? What do we do? What if the connection doesn't work? What do we do?
Yeah.
But it worked, and I'm so glad we took that risk. I'm so glad for the readers out there. I'm so honored, and I'm so grateful, and I'm so humbled by the very fact that we could do this, the very fact that we had readers, we had authors, we had Daniel, we had the support of the Peel District School Board, our library support team, our media and communications team. You all, this was possible, and you are amazing, and you are awesome, and your stories are awesome, and just keep it up.
Well, to keep up the love fest, yeah. Well, to keep up the love fest, there were nothing without the educators and the librarians and the teachers, and we're all trying to make the world a better place for these kids so that they can make the world a better place. I think we're all in that together. So I'm so amazed that you guys pulled this off and that it worked. It's a nice job. Okay.
All right. So with that being said, thank you everyone for joining us this week. It's been a blast. I have so many ideas dancing around in my head for next year. Daniel, do you want to send us off?
Thank you guys. We had a blast. We will see you. Keep reading, keep believing, keep changing the world. Thank you guys.
Thanks, everyone.